We are back. This is the Triple Play Fantasy Basketball Show, proud member of Empire Media. I'm your host, a slightly upset Coach Lewis. We made it to the second round of the playoffs, and I now have no rooting interest as my guy. LeBron was ousted in the first round for the first time in his illustrious 18-year career with a smile from Doc. Going to continue to carry the torch. It's now up for grabs as we saw the defending champion LA Lakers go down. We are again joined by some OG cast and crew, including the super fantasy brother, Kevin Coleman. You can find him at TheBoys_22. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I just survived a nasty flu this week. I lost like 7 pounds, the best diet I've been on in a while. But I'm here to talk a little basketball and go from there. It's beautiful in California right now, so I'm just enjoying the sunshine.
You're a warrior. And what Mario character do you take the most liking to?
He's Waluigi. We've already established that.
Again, an unnecessary shot from Eric, but I have a feeling shots will be fired back from Coach Kev at some point in this pod. And you heard him, E. Mindy, the man who calls the couch bed and doesn't sleep because he's grinding, doing all things sports. What's up, Doc?
Not much, man. You know, it's a great day when LeBron's out of the playoffs, and you can talk about it for an hour on this show.
For the first time on Triple Fantasy Basketball, let's maybe stay away from LeBron today.
Okay.
Round 2 begin. Insert Mortal Kombat sound. Today's Triple Play Fantasy Basketball pod, we discuss the tragic passing of Mark Eaton, coaches changing places, swapping out hats, and future implications. Dame is the best teammate. Jrue Holiday showcases the best sportsmanship. We recap whatever sportsmanship is. We recap and give opinions, all things playoff matchups in our Who You Got section. We also look at the teams that fell short and what it means to their franchise. But first, a little news and notes. We are now in week number 3 of the playoffs. The first round is done, and we got new matchups, but we have a sort of tragic story to touch on first, and that is Mark Eaton passed away in a tragic bicycle accident in his neighborhood, dying a block away from his house. Doc, we're going to start with you, your opinions on Mr. Mark Eaton.
It's just really tragic, and you think about this, it's like the second time in the past couple months that we've had a motor vehicle incident. You know, the first Sean Bradley being paralyzed.
We had 2 giants on and off the court.
It's very sad. You know, obviously the fact that Mark Eaton passed from this is the worst possible outcome. You just really hope that, you know, players take this to heart, former players as well, and anyone that's listening, and hopefully they're just a little bit safe. But prayers out to him and his, you know, and his family that are going through this, and any loved ones he has.
Kev?
Yeah, kind of, you know, same kind of feeling. Whenever this stuff comes, you just kind of like, I was watching the TNT guys, and they were talking about it. It just seems like he's a really good guy, and that it's just a really big tragic accident. And every once in a while, this happens to the basketball families and the basketball kind of brotherhood, and you hate to see it, but it looks like he impacted lives, and that's what we want to take away from our lives, right? Is impact something as we go. So I'm glad he had a positive impact.
He was a great guy, and that showed the book, The 4 Commitments of a Winning Team. And I actually read this book. One of my former players gave me a copy with an autograph version from Mark Eaton. He had the pleasure to go to one of his book signings and get that, and told me just basically how great of a guy he was. I mean, he was an NBA All-Star. He's 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 3-time All-Defense First Team, 2-time All-Defense Second Team. He led the league in blocks 4 times, and he's the all-time leader in blocks per game at 3.5. Number 53 is retired by Utah, but he served as a mentor to Rudy Gobert and helped shape the player and man who he is today. And he helped Jeremy Evans win the dunk contest by letting him dunk on him sitting down. Just a great guy. Just super weird, unfortunate accident being on your bike. He has his bike special made since he's 7'4" and larger than life. And he was a super big advocate of bicycling. And it's just a shame that's ultimately what took his life, because he's doing it for a great cause. And so yeah, to carry on what you guys said, our prayers go out to Mark Eaton and his family as he was taken from us way too early. He was in great health and he was going to live a long time. So we move on and we're going to do our awards recap this week. Our awards were a little different as they weren't like based on what you do on the court, but basically what you do off the court and in between the lines. And that is Damian Lillard wins Teammate of the Year, Kev.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I like Dame. I think he is a consummate professional, and I think that he does. If I wanted to play with somebody, Dame would be the type of kid I would play with. I wish it might be time to move on. I don't know what's going on there in Portland, and with the coaching change, we're going to talk about that. But it seems like the teammates respect him. This dude just balls, right? And he doesn't complain. He works his ass off. Like, that's the type of teammate that you want. So I can see why he wins it.
Absolutely. And Doc, Jrue Holiday wins NBA Sportsmanship Award.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all had a much deeper appreciation for Jrue Holiday when we figured out, what his wife was going through last year and that 2 years ago, and he took some time away from basketball. I think a lot of times we judge these people based on what we see on the court and their performance, but you realize they're humans. And, when you hear about the great things they've done, just makes you appreciate them even more. So sounds like he's very deserving of it.
Yeah, and I've always been impressed with Jrue Holiday, his character, what he stands for, what he says. And there's three of those Holiday brothers in the NBA right now, and who knows what Lauren and Jrue produce in the future, since she's a USA women's soccer player. And we'll look forward in 15, 20 years seeing whatever that kid does in the future. But yeah, shout out Jrue Holiday. He's clearly shown a culture change in the Bucks and somebody that they can give the ball to down the stretch. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Bucks as they're in probably the most intriguing matchup in the second round against the Nets. We'll move on to something that Coach Kev quasi called, and that is Danny Ainge steps down. Brad Stevens steps up as new general manager. What does this mean to the Celtics? Their coaching search begins, and it's got a little bit of a shock this week as it was just announced after their season ended last week. Kev, let's start with you.
Yeah, I kind of talked about this earlier, and I said, hey, it looks like Danny Ainge is time to go. I think on the last pod, I said it just doesn't seem like that he's really in it anymore. And you could kind of tell, I think his rebuild didn't work to what he wanted, and then he left. It was kind of, I'd be interested to see what Eric thinks, but it was kind of weird Brad Stevens moved up, especially with no one really experienced. I think we've seen this before, kind of with Kerr and those type of guys. And I understand he has a really good mind, but I don't know necessarily if that's going to work either, especially because these guys, I guess if he separates himself from the or the players and he's more of a front office role, I guess it could work there. But it will be interesting to see who they bring in and who their next coach is going to be. I heard some things like, maybe Sam Cassell, maybe some other guys out there. I think that would be interesting. Or, we're talking about Becky Hammond from the Spurs. Could they maybe go that route? So I love to see where they go with this. This would be interesting. I think Becky would be fun just to piss people off.
And that's funny. You mentioned Sam Cassell because my brother and I were texting this week, and we said the same thing at the same time. He asked me, I said Sam Cassell. Yeah. He's got ties with that organization. I think that he's chomping at the bit. He just seems like he has the poise and the fight and the grit that Celtics team needs going forward. And of course, he has experience with the Wizards and the Clippers, and he's been kind of all around since he's ended his playing career. Doc?
So I think that the peak of Danny Ainge's GM tenure came with the whole Isaiah Thomas situation. I think a lot of people lost respect for him because basically Isaiah Thomas played through his sister's death, played through a bunch of injuries, and Danny Ainge basically traded him. And I know that was the correct move as a GM, but we've alluded to on here. It's like he had the reputation around the league as a snake. Don't pick up when Danny calls. And it's interesting because he had so many assets, draft picks, cap space, and he didn't really make the most of it. A lot of his picks didn't pan out. I think the Kemba Walker contract looking now is really bad. He's kind of hamstrung between paying him, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. They might not be able to afford Marcus Smart, or they'll probably lose Evan Fournier in free agency. I think Brad Stevens replacing him is the logical move because from what I read, he was burned out coaching. And I think the players didn't necessarily respect him as much after that whole Gordon Hayward thing where they felt like he was giving him more minutes because of their relationship at Butler. So Brad Stevens is a bright basketball mind. Maybe he's one of those guys that's just better served in the front office role or just not a great NBA coach.
And I think he had some knock the ball out the park moves when the KG, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen thing happened. But that's so many years away. And then eventually trading them away to get all those assets from the Brooklyn Nets. But again, he didn't do enough with it. And he didn't pull the trigger on all of the, like last year, they just had 3 first-round picks and they didn't move up to get a big. They let Gordon Hayward walk for nothing. He could have been in a sign and trade for Miles Turner. They let Al Harrington out. Help me out, guys. The guy for OKC that they put down.
Al Horford.
Al Horford. It's just and time again that we needed to change.
Don't get me wrong. I think Danny Ainge was better than half of the GMs in the league, even at this point in his career. Yeah. But I think when you're the GM for the Celtics, your expectations are higher than if you were to be a Portland Trailblazers or, a Memphis Grizzlies.
And I kind of see them in like a sort of a father-son role. And I think that Danny Ainge will still be in Brad Stevens' ear this entire process, just for kind of guidance and help and mentorship. And I mean, he hired him knowing that this is one of the greatest basketball minds that we have going in Brad Stevens. And so maybe this role, I'm curious to see how it goes for him. Maybe this role is what he's made for. We saw he X's and O's wise, he had to figure it out, but it seemed like he lost the locker room a couple times during that season and the respect of the players. And maybe you need somebody with a little bit more basketball with grown men experience. And maybe that's where, Sam Cassell steps in. Speaking of coaches, similar faces and new places, we're going to talk a little Terry Stotts. He's gone after 9 seasons in Portland. We're going to have Doc lead on this one. Was the change necessary, and how do you feel about Portland kind of going forward?
So I think the change was necessary because they've lost in the first round 4 out of the last 5 seasons. It's interesting. Portland actually had the longest active streak of making the playoffs, 8 consecutive postseasons. But I think Damian Lillard, once again, is one of the most underappreciated players in the NBA. And he's the franchise. You want to make him happy. And I think that there's going to be more moves to be followed if they want to try to keep him in Portland. And I think the coach is always the first one to go. And then you might start seeing changes, with the roster construction, maybe GM and other personnel. He's a great coach, but I think once again, besides that Western Conference Finals appearance, they've underperformed in the playoffs most seasons.
Yeah, and they've been so close in all these series, 6, 7 games, a lot of these times, and they just haven't been able to kind of get over the hump. And I think it's also has to do with their roster construction. They're good, but they're just not good enough to win and get by. And sometimes you just got to make a change if you have the same basic core and you're not winning those series. So I think that it took the course took its run. We're going to move on, talk a little college basketball here, but it is Coach K. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time. And again, something Kevin touched on and pretty much called, and that was Coach K's done, and he wants to walk away. And so Kevin,
I don't remember that. I remember Steve Kerr.
I did Coach K too.
Yeah, he took, and then I said John Shire. He looks like he might be the successor, and how he felt about that, and he was not penciling him in as a great option. So, Kev, what's your feelings on this, Coach K?
No, I mean, first of all, shout out to Coach K.
He's a Duke fan, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a Duke fan, but I've also been a Coach K hater the last few years because I felt like the game passed him by a little bit. He wasn't really coaching. He bottled his best players in. I mean, come on. We didn't win a freaking championship with Zion Williams. I mean, that is what he did that year was so frustrating. But, I mean, he is who he is. I love him to death. I will always love the guy. But I was really confused about the John Shire thing. I like Shire. I mean, he probably played on the worst championship team in college basketball history.
Nolan Smith.
Yeah.
Kyle Singler.
That team was terrible.
Plumlee Bros.
Yeah, those dudes just walked out of the park and got lucky 7 straight games. But I would say that, when you're looking at that, when you're looking at Shire, I think it's okay. The thing is about Duke is you have one of the top 3 programs in the country. You could go get anybody you want. And I really wanted Brad Stevens. But, obviously that didn't happen, but maybe it will still next year. We'll see. Maybe Brad Stevens doesn't like to do the Celtics thing. But Shire is kind of underwhelming to me. You have one of the best programs in the country. Go get a dude. Instead, you get John Shire, who might be a great coach and maybe, but they talked about how Shire got all these recruits. Let's be real. Coach K got the recruit. Shire talked to these guys, but the guy that signed the deal and delivered these guys was Coach K. So, stop using that as an example. I'm in a wait-and-see mode, but I'm a little nervous now. Luckily, North Carolina hired a worse coach, so I know they're going to be worse than us, but that's fine.
What do you got against Hubert Davis?
You are such a get-off-my-lawn type of guy, Kevin.
I am. I'm old, man. I don't like people driving fast in my neighborhood. I yell at them now. I'm getting to that stage in my life, but I'm fine. Hubert Davis is trash, coach. I don't know.
Is that just a Tar Heel hater talk, or you just don't like him from because I remember he was a college analyst before he got back into coaching.
He's just not good at anything. He wasn't good as an analyst. He's not going to be good as a coach. And that blue is ugly as shit. Who wants to wear that color blue? I don't understand why you wear that blue.
He's not bad at everything. He used to shoot the 3-ball with the best of them. I remember playing.
Was that before a 3-point line or after?
Yeah.
Because that was a long time ago, coach.
After. I used to play with him on NBA Live 98 for the 3-point competition.
98.
He had a wetter, man.
Yeah. Well, great. So, okay, he was very good in the video game. There you go. There is Hubert Davis love.
Thank you. But I am curious to see kind of what the player turned into coach, sitting on the bench this long time, what he does with that franchise. Also, I was kind of talking about the empowerment of these 2 great Hall of Fame coaches, the fact that they can name their successors without a hiring process. We'll see what next year leads to, because the Duke still does have a very strong recruiting class, and maybe they can win one for the Gipper. But we'll move on. Last little news and notes is Gary Payton is hired by Lincoln University in Oakland, California, his hometown, to be the head coach. And that'll be fun. We kind of saw him in the Big 3 yelling at a bunch of people as he was on the sideline. But he is a great basketball mind. I don't know how great it'll turn out. But representing your hometown, that's a great opportunity. And good for Hall of Famer Gary Payton.
He might kill a ref. If anybody kills a ref, it's going to be Gary Payton.
Agreed.
Big facts. Little plug top. Wherever you find your podcast, go follow the Triple Play Fantasy franchise. We got all things hardwood, diamond, and gridiron covered. Our Triple Play Fantasy YouTube channel also taps into Movie Minute reviews, Super Fantasy Bros with Kevin and Jacob, Fantasy 15 that argues 1 versus 1, including most recently Terry McLaurin versus DJ Moore, Between the Seams, Fantasy Baseball Talk with Marty and Mac, Monkey Knife Fight Picks with Doc and Brad, Fantasy Foodies, who just featured Field Yates talking IPA, seltzers, and much more. We got everything you need. Honestly, thanks for your support and listens every download, share, 5-star rating, and comment helps us. And we're going to continue to grind to make this podcast the number 1 pick, like Cade Cunningham. Check us out on Twitter and IG at TripPlayFantasy. Our most recent interview, I sat down with Washington Redskins icon Doc Walker on the Triple Play Fantasy Football Pod. Thanks again from the entire Triple Play Fantasy family for your listens each and every week. And now it's time for a little NBA catch-up for our final week of the first round, starting with our impressive performance of the week. Who went bananas this last week, Doc? Who caught your eye?
There's not many matchups going on, and it's not LeBron. For me, I got to go Devin Booker. That elimination game, 7 threes in the first quarter, 22 points. He killed it right away. And I think we're really seeing the ascension of him, taking it to the next level. I think he's one of the best pure scorers in the game. And I'm really happy for Suns fans. I feel like they've been one of the teams that's really been gypped in the past, couple decades of really not getting to the finals. And they're the number 2 seed in the West. They have home court for the next series against the Nuggets. So props, Devin Booker.
Are those Valley jerseys the coolest jerseys in the league?
They are pretty cool.
Oh, my goodness.
What? And you know what? I feel like I have to apologize because I haven't been saying Jay Crowder's a good basketball player. I've been saying he's a good athlete that plays basketball, but he hit his first 3 threes in Game 6, and he looks pretty good. So I got to apologize a little bit about that.
He was a huge difference maker for Miami last year, and they solely missed 3-point shooting in their series as they got blown out the water. Kev, who you got for best jerseys before your impressive performance of the week? Since it seems like you're not a fan of the Valley jerseys.
I'm old school, as Eric likes to point out. I like the crisp, clean, older jerseys, like not a lot of like what the Suns got going on there. I just don't like it. I do like the Miami Vice jerseys, though. Those are probably my favorite. Yeah,
I love those Miami Vice jerseys. I really like
but it's clean
jersey too.
Yeah, they're clean though. There's no, come on. Let's just.
There's no advertising. It's no crazy colors or designs. It's just right there. It's just right there.
Like, and a side note, would you guys? I hate people that buy shoes with all that shit too. Like, just keep it simple. Like, basketball shoes do not need to look like Fruity Pebbles, Coach. Okay, like
yes, they do.
No, they don't. Keep it clean.
Do you know there's actually a pair of Kyries called the Fruity Pebbles?
Yes, that's where I know, because I like the Kyries. Like, I love the Kyries.
LeBron got some Fruity Pebbles too.
Yeah, LeBron. Yeah, but you can't ball LeBron shoes. They weigh like 29 pounds. Like, I don't.
That is true. That is true.
People ball in those shoes.
The LeBron 10s are great hooping shoes, and I'm a guy that always matches the shoe with the jersey from when I was 12, 13 years old, and now that grown man that people say, after 30, you're not supposed to be wear jerseys. But I'm changing it. I'm changing the culture. You're allowed to, all 30-plus-year-olds that are still wearing jerseys. You got your support from Coach Lewis.
All 5 of you.
I also like the Brooklyn Nets jerseys with their like multiple colors too. So there's some cool jerseys going around. Impressive performance of the week for me, twofold. Kawhi Leonard took over Game 6. He shot 18 of 25. He had 2 clutch 3-pointers on 45 points after blowing Game 5, shooting that air ball at the buzzer. Luka in that Game 5 gave us 42, 14 assists, and 8 rebounds. He scored or assisted on 31 of 36 shots. That's 83%, the highest percentage all time for any playoff game. LeBron second with a game of 81% for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, this kid is amazing, and we're recording this pod before Game 7, so it's still a coin flip for our last first-round matchup, but this is what we all wanted to see. No team has won on their home court. It's been the away team that's won every single game in this series, and let's see if that serves course. I would be happy with a Luka defeats the Clippers in the first round. Kev, did you give your impressive performance of the week, or did I just gloss over it because we were talking about jerseys?
No, I didn't. I did. I'm going to give a shout out to Trae. I know his game was a little while ago, but Trae Young, I mean, what he did in that last game against the Knicks, he had 36 points, and he just closed them out. And when he took the bow at the Garden, and he did that, like, I loved it. I thought it was great. I've actually become a Trae Young stan now. I'm going to be going on that just because of what he did, and he showed up, and he was plus. Hey, he was plus in every game except for Game 1, which he had plus or minus of a 0. So he didn't
hit the game winner in Game 1.
Yeah, and he didn't have a negative game. He looked great. He kept his percentage up. He had a pretty poor shooting in the last couple of games, but he still had a plus minus. He had plus 17, plus 16, and he looked good. And then when he took that bow, give me that showmanship all day. I love it. So I'm going to go with him.
He's pure entertainment, and the Spice is like, this is a city of shows, and I heard this is what they do at the end. And I mean, what's not to love with him? And he was taking what the defense gave him. Sometimes they were double, triple teaming, and he was making the right pass and play. And he clearly was the alpha. He stepped up to the stage. He's getting spit on. He's getting trolled, talking about his hairline, and or he's balding. Trae's balding, which was that part for the fans. That was a funny one.
Someone on our social media team was making fun of him there too. I don't know who it was. I'm not sure.
Yeah, who was that guy? Doc?
You know who that guy was? I don't know. All I remember is seeing a pic of a lollipop that has some hair on it in comparison.
Yeah. Also, Dame was pretty chill with his 55 points, but 12 3-pointers, NBA record, tied it. But let's move on to our playoff matchups. In our Who Ya Got, this is the main event, and we got a little sprinkle of what's to come. The Nets take game 1 over the Bucks, but James Harden in 13 seconds re-aggravated that hamstring injury and looks like he's about to be out for the playoffs. Blake Griffin was amazing. Doc, who you got in this matchup?
I feel like this is cheating because the Nets already won game 1, but I'm going to say the Nets in 6. They still have 2 of the best players in the world in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And I think Milwaukee's just not as built for the postseason. But I do think whoever wins this probably has the best chance to win the championship.
I don't think that's a crazy thing to say at this point. Kev, who you got in this Nets v Bucks? We know how much you love the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, but I hate the Nets more. But
I hate them.
I will say, like, I'm going to say this. Yesterday, I saw somebody on Twitter say, "Oh, that's not fair. Harden went down for my Nets." I'm like, bro, you have Durant, Kyrie, Blake Griffin, even Joe Harris is legit. I mean, you shut the hell up, okay? You guys have an all-star squad. You lose one guy, you're going to be fine. I think that what you saw yesterday is kind of what the series is going to be. Middleton was bad yesterday, 6 for 23,
bad shooting,
0 for 5. I've been telling you guys, Middleton cannot be your second best player, and Jrue Holiday didn't have a great game either. I mean, when you looked at their script, what happened to him in that game, PJ Tucker was not very good either. Like, they just don't have guys. They just don't have enough firepower in this series. We said that their defense had to be good, but defense going down, doing those things, like, it just doesn't look good for them. But the Nets, they have 2 of the top 10 players in the game. So, I mean, that's where it's going to be. And even if it hardens out, I have a hard time seeing the Nets lose. I really do. If it's a Nets-Clippers finals, I might not ever watch basketball again. Yeah.
And that's what
new drinking game on this podcast. Take a shot every time Kevin says, "You know what I hate." we're at like 7 or 8 right now.
I'm trying to get you guys to understand that I'm old school. Okay, I'm just old school when I see this stuff.
And for me, I'm gonna take the Bucks in 6. I don't see Middleton shooting bad in this series. I gotta take him in 6. Because if it goes to game 7, there's no way I'm betting against Kyrie and KD in game 7. But I do think that depth in these injuries are going to catch up with the Nets. It looks like, again, James Harden is out for the playoffs. Jeff Green is still MIA. It took Kyrie Irving to play 45 minutes out of the 48 yesterday. Blake Griffin played 35. KD played 40. I don't know if all of that wear and tear bodes well for people that have injury history, because it's looking like this is a 8-man rotation that includes Bruce Brown, Claxton, and Mike James, who played 30 minutes yesterday. I mean, yeah, he's a gamer, but it's a lot to depend on. I think the Bucks finally figure it out. Also, this isn't a rooting interest pick by me because I do not want KD to win another championship being a LeBron guy. So I felt like I had no rooting interest left, but I do have one. I want the Nets to lose, and I'm on 2 sides of the fence once again. But let's go Bucks. They were my preseason Eastern Conference pick. All right, we'll move on. The Denver Nuggets versus the Phoenix Suns, the 3 and the 2 seed, prevailed after a lot of people picked Portland and the Lakers. Doc, we're going to start with you. Who you got with Nuggets and Suns, which is an intriguing matchup?
I have Nuggets in 7. I think this is going to be a really, really good series. I think Ayton is going to be a good matchup for Jokic, and it's going to slow it down. Devin Booker and CP3's shoulder are going to be the X factor. If CP3 is limited, I think the Nuggets are going to have a much easier time just shutting down Booker because you don't really run the offense through Ayton. But I think, these are going to be 2 high-scoring offenses. I think both of them are kind of playing with house money because they were the underdogs in their series, even though that they were the higher seed or the lower seed. I just want a good series and ultimately the Nuggets to win because I do have betting interest in them.
Nuggets in 7 on Phoenix home court, which looks like the most electric right now in the playoffs. Kev, who you got?
Yeah, so I'm going with my guy Chris Paul. I want him to make a finals one time in his career. He deserves it. I mean, he's point guard, right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
Remember it used to be Chris Paul versus Darren Williams? Darren Williams is dead. Like Darren Williams is gone. I don't even know if Darren Williams is where he's at. But I like Booker. I like those other areas. I think the matchup's great. I think these two guys are going to go at it. I love the fact that they're going to be playing against each other. I think it does go 7, but I'm going with the Suns.
And I'm going with Suns in the 7 for the pure reason that I think that the home court advantage will play its course. I think that the home team, unlike what's happening in the Clippers and Mavs series, is the home team will win every single game here. Joker's a mastermind. He changes up mid-game, every game. He just figures out exactly what the defense is given. But there is a mastermind on the other end in CP3, and we would love to see him in the finals. That's kind of his only thing, is that he hasn't won in the playoffs. This would be the greatest feather on the cap. But Michael Porter Jr. is here in the 6 games versus the Blazers. He averaged 19 and 7 on 54% shooting, 41% on 3. He is one of our best 3-point shooters we have in the NBA. I don't think that gets talked about that much, but he shoots over 40%. He has an unblockable shot. It's almost like KD, where he's 6'10", and he shoots at the peak of his arc. But Jokic is the best player in this series, but I think that the fact that Jamal Murray is missing will play a factor in some of these very close games. And I see a lot of these games being close and not many blowouts. But it's anyone's game. We all got it at 7. I did want to point out, it was curious timing. Chris Paul declined the $44 million that he was going to get next year. He opted out. You're not going to get that in free agency, but that's a huge number to pass up. I mean, like when you're going towards the end of your career. What do you think about the timing mid-Lakers series, and what do you think that means for Phoenix going forward, Doc?
So I think he's going to wait and see how Phoenix does this year. I think the Lakers championship window might be closing. And that's the thing about in basketball, the championship window can close very quick. And I think if the Clippers get eliminated in the first round, they're going to have some shuffling, and the West is going to be wide open. And maybe Chris Paul is more than happy on restructuring a team-friendly deal so that if Phoenix does show some upside, you say, look, I'll take half of that $44 million I was making, and let's sign someone else, and let's make a title run next year.
Kev, what's your take on passing up on $44 million?
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, you can pass up $44 million. Good for you. Like, that is, damn. I mean, shit. I wish I could pass up that money. I mean, hey, it's weird, right? Smoke. I agree with what Eric's talked about, though. Like, I understand kind of the windows and where it's at. I just don't know. Can he get that deal somewhere else that he wants? I would take $44 million and just deal with it, and then go take like a 1-year deal, like worth 10 to 15. And the next year and try to win a championship if he doesn't this year. But I'm not him. He's probably got plenty of money lined up anywhere. I'm over here sweating about my dryer that broke. So, I mean, it is what it is. But I think that's impressive. Good for him. Good for Paul. And you know what? The other thing about Paul is he's a business guy. Like, he took his money. Remember, they said, hey, do you want to – when he went to the Thunder, they're like, hey, maybe we'll buy you out for half.
He said no.
Like, no, and that's – hey, you know what? You can't hate on that. I give him props, and he played well, and he got that Thunder team where they were. So I give him credit. He said, hey, you ain't taking my money, and that's what I think a lot of players should do.
Yeah, he leaves OKC, and they go from playoff team. I think they were the 4 or 5 seed last year to off the map worst team in the NBA with the same roster construction.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think it's very interesting timing that it's named in that first round when you're playing against Los Angeles. Now, Chris Paul and LeBron James have always wanted to play with each other, and maybe this is where the business savvy Chris Paul comes in play. Maybe you win a championship. Maybe there's a little under the table banana bro cash getting thrown around. Maybe they bring in Carmelo, who's also a free agent. This is my conspiracy, because that's what I want to see. But I just think it is crazy, and we'll see what happens with Phoenix. If they win a championship, clearly you would see him try to sign maybe a smaller contract. But he is not the point guard of the future. He's probably got a couple years left in him, and he'll have his choice to go anywhere he wants. But what he's done with that Phoenix team is just remarkable. And we're all rooting for a little Chris Paul, no matter how much of how irritating he gets on the court for his opponents. We're rooting for Mr. CP3, the coach on the floor. but we forgot kind of to gloss over this Game 7 and the implications it would take for the Utah Jazz. So we're going to kind of give a who you got pick on Game 7, and as well as double down on who do we pick in that matchup of the one-seeded Utah Jazz versus whoever comes out of this Mavs Clippers series. And we're going to start with Kev.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Clippers just because of Kawhi. I think they have a better surrounding cast. Now, if Pandemic P comes back, I mean, hey, we'll see. Okay, we'll see if he's been able to do that. But I think the real disappointment is Porzingis. I think we can agree on that. I mean, I don't know where he's gone. He has not looked good in this series. He looked awful the last game. Luka was way too in that last Game 6. The last 5 minutes, he was way too passive. When you watched him play, he's got to go take that thing, and you got to realize, hey, this is what it is. That's what Kawhi did. That's what superstars do, and I think Luka's going to learn that as you go. Hey, give me the ball. We'll just figure this out. But I got to go. I got to go the Clippers as much as it pains me. I think Kawhi is just that damn good. But I will say, I mean, if Porzingis can do anything today in this game and do something, I think they could win.
And who do you got if the Clippers advance against a Utah matchup?
I think I'm going to go Clippers. I don't want to say I've hated because I don't want anybody to get drunk today. But when I say Utah is still a fraud to me. They're still frauds to me. Clippers I feel like are way more talented in that area. There's a reason why the Clippers lost on purpose to stay away from the Lakers, and the Lakers lost anyway. But I think that's what it is.
E.
So I'm going Clippers in Game 7 because I think what they're going to do is they're going to pressure Luka full court every time he touches the ball. Maybe they'll have Kawhi guard him. Maybe they'll have Pandemic P. Maybe they'll have Morris guard him. I can see them throwing a lot of different matchups and saying, hey, we'll let Porzingis, we'll let Tim Hardaway, we'll let Jalen Brunson beat us. If the Clippers win,
they did that in Game 6 too. At the end of the game, they tripled Luka. Porzingis missed a lob that was wide open. He threw it to Tim Hardaway for a nice open shot. He made the right play, but they didn't make it.
So I think if the Clippers win, I do think that they beat the Jazz. But I think if the Mavericks win, I think the Jazz win in 5.
So if Mavs win, you got Utah. But if the Clippers win, you got the Clippers.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And so this is hard because I'm huge on Luka and I want them to win. But just watching how the last game turned out, I think that it comes down to the wire, and Kawhi puts a chokehold on the end of the game and wins, and it'll be the first win on the home court that we've seen. But this is one of those games where I'm super rooting for the Mavericks. And then in the next matchup, I could see going anyway with Utah. I wouldn't put anything past them to advance. I think that they really do have a logistical chance. Even against the Clippers, I think Rudy Gobert poses a matchup issue. They're having problems guarding Boban in this Mavs series. So they're small. They play Marcus Morris at the 5, and we know what Rudy Gobert can do defensively. And hey, guess what? Donovan Mitchell is really freaking good. They are undefeated in the playoffs with him playing. Cakewalking. But so who would I take? I don't freaking know. Flip a coin, heads or tails. I don't really have a good take on this one. But we'll move on to our last playoff matchup that we haven't discussed, and that is the number 1 Philadelphia 76ers versus your Atlanta Hawks. We're all stands of Trae Young, and we love the spectacle that brings his way. We're going to start with Doc on this matchup.
It's tough because we don't know Embiid's health.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to go the 76ers in 6. I think they're a really good defensive team. We talk about Ben Simmons being an underrated defender. I think Trae Young is the enigma for the Hawks offense, and if you can slow him down, John Collins is probably the only other guy that can create his own shot. But I think the others, Kevin Huerter, Clint Capella, those are all dependent on getting the ball open and shooting threes. So I think they have the blueprint of how to beat them. The 76ers were the best home team during the regular season, I think, to the Utah Jazz. So I'm going 76ers in 6.
Kev.
Yeah, like you said, it's just up to Embiid, right? It's just kind of one of those things. If I don't know. The Hawks are sneaky. They're going to win a couple games. I think it's going to be 6, like you talked about. And the one thing that worried me in that first series, even against the Wizards, is their defense didn't look as good as they had been in the past. And when you watch them play, they were giving up a lot of open buckets. Simmons is never going to be a free throw shooter. I understand that. But the one thing I will say, which I was going to get to, I'm glad Coach brought that picture up, is that if there's one guy that can stop Trae Young, it's going to be Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons' his length, his defensive presence, what he can do out there. So that is an interesting, fun matchup to watch. But Ben Simmons is going to switch on Trae a lot. So I expect him to use that to his advantage there. So I think that with that being said, I'm going to go with the Sixers just because of Simmons' ability to guard Trae.
And I'm going Hawks. I think Ben Simmons. Yeah, I know. Spicy. And without injuries, I don't see Atlanta in this position to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think they lose. Yes, I think Ben Simmons will give Trae Young some fits, but I think they're gonna somehow find him free with certain screens that'll edge them out. So I actually got the Hawks in 6 games, and they'll finish on home court. I don't think Joel Embiid is coming back. Like a partial tear of a meniscus. That's your knee, and he's dealt with that. He is another re-aggravation of that injury that he had earlier this year, and he missed some time. One thing I don't play around with big guys and knee injuries. Two, you don't come back from a meniscus in a week unless you're super. I don't even has it ever
unless
been
you're
done?
a super fantasy bro.
Yeah, I just don't see with Joel with all that. He's 300 pounds and 7 foot. So I'm going against the Sixers, and it's so super disappointing. Now we see Joel Embiid go down. We saw AD and LeBron playing half what they normally are. We see James Harden going down. We saw Jaylen Brown going down in an injury-riddled season that really has affected certain teams' trajectory and chances to win this championship. So we're going to talk about some of these highlighted teams to some of these disappointments, and we'll start with the big one, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers. In the first round, they're up 2-1 in the series against the 2-seeded Phoenix Suns, and then they proceed to lose the next 3 games while AD kind of goes down. They were kind of winning game 4 when AD was on the court, but it really affected what they were trying to do, especially with LeBron James playing. He can't do any spin moves. It's clearly a nagging with the ankle injury. Yeah, he could go up and down, but it's that side to side, those lateral angles that he just really didn't have it, and really was, I guess, I think the lowest scoring points per game in any series that he's ever had. So, Doc, your opinions on the Lakers that hit some injury woes? You're on mute. It was going to be a bad take, anyways, right, Kev?
Yeah, we was glad we got that one out of the way. All right, let's try again, Eric.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. The 2 teams that went to the finals last season, the Lakers, both, I mean, they got embarrassed. And it was a 71-day layoff from the end of the finals to the beginning of the regular season, which is the shortest amount of time ever. And I think it really took its toll because in the 72-game season, everything has a little bit more significance. LeBron James is 36 years old, and as much as he's defied Father Time is undefeated, unless you're Tom Brady. And Anthony Davis, he's a very injury-prone player. He's always been banged up, and what happens is when you commit, 60% of your salary cap to those 2 players who are both a little bit on the older side, and they can't play every day or those back-to-backs, and then you expect them to be fully healthy for the playoffs against a young team like the Suns. I think they're the second youngest team in the NBA to the Grizzlies. You just kind of saw that they ran out of gas, and it was a lot on the offense. They weren't able to really create their own shot, get back on defense, play good transition ball. It's now easy to kind of be in hindsight and say, oh, I expected to see this. But I think when we first were going into the playoffs, we didn't think about this, but now it kind of makes more sense.
And to piggyback on the other 2 teams that were in the Final Four, Denver's the only one still going, but they lost Jamal Murray. Boston, they lost Jaylen Brown. Kemba hasn't been healthy all season. So the teams in the Final Four of last year's bubble championships, they all were disappointing outside of Denver, which has an alien in Nikola Jokic that doesn't get hurt and just seems to have everything figured out. For me, I think that it was unlucky circumstances, and we saw Dennis Schroeder go through COVID protocols at the end of the season. He clearly was not what he was doing before. He went on that list. He's a free agent. He passed down $80 million extension. They have to address this point guard position going for the future. And I mean, I already sprinkled in Chris Paul, but there are the Derrick Rose. There are a lot of free agents that you could kind of plug in that could fit in with this team. But it's all on health. I mean, the Lakers win that series if they got AD and LeBron fresh, and I think it actually did catch up to them because 20 games into the season, they were by far the best team. And if the playoffs started then, they would ran away with it. Kev?
Yeah, I think the injury thing, street clothes Davis, is what Eric was mentioning earlier. He had his stuff from Barkley. I think, I just think it really comes down to they bet on the wrong guy on Kyle Kuzma a couple years ago when they wouldn't trade. Oh my
gosh, yes.
When they wouldn't trade Kuzma and they said he was going to be the next guy. I mean, look what he did in the playoffs. He had 0 points, 2 points, 8 points, 11, 15, and then 2 points in Game 6. They needed him to step up, and he just didn't. I don't even know if Kuzma is he a rotation guy right now? He's only 25.
I mean, he plays. What does he play a factor? They passed up on Kyle Lowry at the end of the day. All they had to do was give up Thalen, Horton Tucker, and Kuz, and they would have had Kyle Lowry into the mix. I mean, with the injuries, it probably wouldn't have worked out anyways. But this is a win now team. Their window is 2 years, and I don't know if they're looking back and saying, "Man, we should have made that trade."
Well, yeah, they could have done that. And then you also looked at like Andre Drummond. I mean, he didn't do anything. He didn't fit. Montrezl Harrell really didn't fit with that team. Schroeder didn't really fit. I think every move that they made was the wrong move. So when you're looking at it, like from every perspective, guys that needed to step up. And in KCP, man, God, get him off that roster. Like he got
hurt.
Yeah,
he was so good last year in the bubble, though.
Oh, he's so good. Yeah, okay. I mean, we don't have a high.
He was their third best player in the bubble last year. I mean. Like, yes, he's overpaid. I agree that there's things that you wish were better, but sometimes upgrades at all these positions, you think that you had an upgrade everywhere across the board, and with Danny Green and Dwight Howard, and no, it fell on their face. These were not upgrades. Montrezl Harrell did not play though. Why doesn't he get on the court? Seems like he matches up well with Aiden. He could play like a couple minutes a game, and Dennis Schroeder dropping 0. In the game before the elimination game is frightening to see. So sometimes that, like, when you change to upgrade, it doesn't really work out for your chemistry, and you had something good, and maybe running it back might have been the better choice of it. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the Lakers going forward. Obviously, we're not done talking about them, but let's talk a little bit about New York Knicks, and hopefully you don't walk out on your team before the game is over like we saw Spike Lee and Reggie Miller roasted him. So what's your take on the New York Knicks in the playoffs for the first time in a long time, Doc?
Well, I think it's good they got back there, and I think they have a foundation. Their strategy this year was to play really good defense. They had the lowest amount of defensive points allowed per game this year. I think they need more scoring, and I think we kind of saw that Julius Randle had a really good regular season, but if he's inconsistent in the playoffs, I mean, who you're going to go to? They didn't really have that second option. And they have a lot of young pieces. They have Obi Toppin. They have Emmanuel Quickley. I think Derrick Rose was a great story. They have Mitchell Robinson. They have Nerlens Noel. They have some cap space as well. So what I think they need to do is they need to make a package deal, maybe for a Damian Lillard, maybe for a Bradley Beal. But I think they're on the cusp of something, and they can have that defensive philosophy while adding another offensive player.
And it is something to look at, but I don't see Portland giving them up. That would be perfect. And RJ Barrett is a young star that, like, you could package in a deal that makes sense. If I'm Portland, if I'm trying to reboot and start over, but I don't know if Portland is ever going to give that kid up. Kev, what's your take on the New York Knicks? The Knickerbockers are back.
Yeah, I mean, hey, they did fine. I think they kind of came back to earth a little bit. The defensive thing was kind of the most confusing. They per cap. I mean, I think per rating they had top 3 defense throughout the regular season, and then you get into the playoffs, they just looked out of sorts. And I don't know, Randall kind of came back. Then RJ Barrett, he was solid, but that was, it was a little tougher there. So
yeah, one thing he showed inexperience. He did not play well,
and he's got to learn. But one thing I did see is that the Knicks have the 19th and 21st pick, and then they were talking about maybe moving up.
I don't know if that gets them into the top 10. I think we overvalue those picks. But what if they were able to move up a little bit and get like James Bouknight from UConn, get a scorer, get somebody in there can get buckets. I like Bouknight. We've talked about him on this if you missed it. Or hey, what about Cam Thomas? Like, what if Cam Thomas kind of slips up there a little bit from LSU?
I think they need some veteran players, though. I don't think they need more young talent. I think they need some older players.
Well, that's fine. They can bring in older guys. They still need to score a young scorer off the bench, right? I mean, are you going to get older players of those 2 picks, 19 and 21?
I mean, I think they could make a deal for Bradley Beal if he wants out. Like, you could give up RJ Barrett, you could give up Emmanuel Quickly and a couple picks, and then you have a core of Beal, Randall, Obi Toppin. If you decide to keep Derrick Rose, you have 2 centers, Mitchell Robinson and Nerlens Noel, that can anchor. You don't have to worry about getting production from them. I don't think they have the pieces to get Beal or Lillard. I think that more logistically that McCollum might be an option for them to get. And we've seen that story in Portland. It's just not worked out. And CJ can get you buckets. Derrick Rose was the alpha, though. That Derrick Rose was the best player on that team. And Julius Randle showed that he is not a top 15 player, even though he was probably going to be all NBA this year. He floundered when it really mattered. Those shots that he was making all season, he was missing all of them. And the New York faithful let him have it, and it just didn't go well. But there's a lot on their future with Derrick Rose being a free agent. That point guard position needs to be addressed, and I see Derrick Rose moving on to a different place. Even though it was a perfect fit, they gotta look towards the future. But they do have a good young core, and we'll see what happens. They definitely need scoring off the bench, though, Kev. I agree with that move, and Quickly wasn't consistent enough to provide you that. But the scoring was outside of Derrick Rose. They really were just looking around like, who can give us anything? Because they got a bunch of role guys that know their role. They can shoot the three if you can get them open. But they need an addition. But they look promising. Speaking of promising, maybe one of the most promising young teams, and that's the Grizzlies. Ja Morant is a superstar, and he just did everything he needed to do in the playing games, as well as in that game 1, and even in these losses, he dropped a 45. But you want to see what happens with the young group with Morant, Triple J, Valanciunas, Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane, Grayson Allen. What do we think about the Grizzlies, Kev?
Yeah, I think they need more talent, though. Like, they got to get another guy in there, like we've been talking about. I don't think that roster is as good as it needs to be. But I am interested here. I want to hear what Doc's opinion here is of this. Would you? Because I saw it. Would you rather have Ja or Jason Tatum?
Jason Tatum. Oh, wait, are we factoring contract or just talent?
Just talent on a team, because I did see this recently where they said, I forget who said it. They said they'd rather have Ja than Jason Tatum. I'm just wondering where Ja fits in this pedigree of guys.
I think Ja is good. I think it's really hard to win with a guard being your best player. I think you have to have a forward because they can defend multiple positions. They can rebound. I mean, there's so many good guards. I think there's less elite forwards. And what we saw Jason Tatum do this year in the playoffs. But I think they're right. Memphis is in a good rebuild. They were in that grit and grind era for the longest time, holding on to Conley and Marc Gasol, like really trying to make it work. And now they're kind of in a more younger, transition phase. I think they need another superstar to help. But I mean, if you're a Grizzlies fan, I think, their over-under seasons for the win was 31. They hit 34, so better than Vegas expected to. They knocked the Warriors out of the bubble or out of the play-in tournament. So I think you got to be happy with what they're going, because I think rebuilds are typically a lot longer than this.
Yeah. For him to go heads up with Steph Curry and come out victorious shows a lot about this young superstar. And I think we all are in consensus here. We'll take Jason Tatum over him. But when we talked about top, 25 players under 25, he wasn't in our top 5 or top 10 for some of us. And clearly based on his performance, he showed the likings of a top 5 player under 25. But they gotta strike gold. They got to get lucky somehow and get that wing superstar, Eric, that you're mentioning. They just don't come in free agency to places like Memphis or Utah, and you just got to win in the draft. So they got to pull something off. But I will say this team looks like a future playoff team for, the forthcoming future. And they do. And he's just man, the ability to step up when it matters, like him, and how we just saw with Trae Young, separates the really good players from like the superstars.
His shooting doesn't get me all like when I watch him shoot. There's just something about it. It just seems streaky at times. Like I would like to see him improve his 3-point shot and his jump shot.
It kind of reminds me of Westbrook early in his career, where he's just like an insane freak of nature that can jump and dunk, but the fundamentals aren't exactly there yet.
The shot takes a little while, and the percentage isn't really what you want. But it did improve as the season went on, so you can kind of see some promise. And he's super hardworking, works harder than a lot of them. So I just see him as a winning player, and I see him figuring out that 3-point percentage a little bit better as time goes on. So from one team that it looks like they'll be in the playoffs in the future for a while to another team that's kind of in limbo. They just fired their head coach after 9 years. Damian Lillard is a top 5 player in the NBA. It seems like he needs some help. Where the Portland players at? Is their championship window closed, Doc?
I don't even think they ever had a championship window.
You're right.
Like they were like a consensus, like anywhere from 4 to 6 in the West each year, kind of like the West Coast Wizards, where you have really good guards, you play good in the regular season, and maybe the peak of your season is the Western Conference Finals at best. I mean, they got swept that year that they played the Warriors, so I never really think it was open, but I do think that Portland is tired of being in this purgatory where, you don't really have a championship window, but you're not in rebuild.
And that was a good call out, because I kind of worded that question as like how they handled things. They sent 2 first-round picks for Covington. They kind of went all in on that, and you had all of your core there to play outside of Zach Collins. So you thought like maybe this is your opportunity. And I mean, you were the 6th seed, you fought your way in, and Dame is amazing. But I think that's where they were kind of thinking maybe we can do it with Covington as a missing piece. But it looks like that was a terrible trade. Covington's gives you like less than 10 points per game and plays basically the whole game. So I know he offers a lot on defense, but I mean, they couldn't stop Kevin Porter Jr. last series. Kev, thoughts on the Blazers?
Yeah, I was going to say the only time that they had a window was 2018, 2019 when they lost to the Golden State when they got swept, but nobody was beating Golden State. So like, when you say you have a window, but that year, I mean, they finished 3rd in the Western Conference. They beat the Nuggets, they beat the Thunder in the playoffs, and they were balling. I mean, when you looked at their top guys, Lillard, McCollum, Nurkic, if he would stay healthy and he was been around more, maybe they'd have more of a shot. When they had Cantor there, my guy Rodney Hood, who was criminally underrated back then, because I thought he was a great 6th guy coming off the bench and bench guy, rotation guy. They had Seth Curry on that team too. I mean, so they had shooting, they had the guys around them that you like to see. I think that was the last time they hear. I want Lillard to get out of there. CJ and those guys, I really feel like they got to break that team up. I really feel like it's time to kind of move on when you kind of hit that limit. We've always seen these plateaus, right? It's time to kind of go. But I like the Lillard to the Knicks thing. That would be really fun for basketball. I think that would be an excellent thing. I'm really pissed I didn't think about that. Doc did, but I really think that would be a great spot for him.
Let him know, Doc. All right, our mentally deflated Miami Heat, they took a toll. We talked about them in the bubble and the fact that they kind of overachieved, and they made it 6th in a healthy LA Laker team, and Jimmy Butler was going bananas, dropping 40-point triple doubles in the finals, and he was a no-show this year in the playoffs. It was a super shocker for him. Doc, what's your take on the Heat?
I mean, I think Pat Riley said it best. They're mentally deflated. I think they're one of the most well-run organizations, but once again, they're humans. And I don't think any of us can relate to going through a bubble, having a 71-day layover between the final day of the regular season and the beginning of that. So figure you got to get your body right in training. They probably took, tests pretty frequently to make sure that, COVID didn't spread in the NBA. So, I mean, we're not even talking about the physical toll it takes on your body. I mean, for Pat Riley, who is one of the most sharp and I don't want to say forward thinking, but very ingrained basketball minds to say, hey, guys, take a break. Don't do anything. You have to know that it was very much grinding on them. Yeah. It's probably not fun anymore. It's probably like, we have to play another game. Ugh.
Yeah.
Like
They got wrecked. They got wrecked by COVID. Almost them and the Wizards. Like they got, and the Mavericks. I really got crushed at the beginning of the season with COVID, and they were really always trying to climb their way up and never really got into their full groove as a team. But they are a super destination here, and there are some free agents that look intriguing, and they could kind of move some of these pieces to maybe bring in a third superstar that would bring Miami a big three back and put them in title contention. Kev, what's your take on the Miami Heat now and going forward?
I think Eric said it good there. I mean, that's the reason why they lost. But what about CJ McCollum? We just talked about Portland. And I know like Dame would be the guy, Beal's the guy. But like imagine bringing CJ in there. I mean, he can still score. And
being the third guy is a lot different from being the second guy.
Yeah. So you have CJ, Bam, Jimmy. You fill those other guys, those pieces around. I don't know what's going on at Old Depot. I don't know if he's still out there or not. I know they're going to have to re-sign him if they want to. So if you get those guys there, but imagine getting CJ in there. You get someone to help to scoring with Jimmy. Bam's still there, defensive presence. I think that's a pretty formidable duo.
Well, and they said Tyler Hero was untouchable in the James Harden trade. Oh, that was awful. But now, like maybe you throw out young Tyler for a CJ McCollum, and maybe that is enticing for both teams. All right, the Boston Celtics, they got a lot of questions to answer. We touched on them as far as head coach, general manager, and that situation. Again, we talked about them being one of the Final Four teams, and health kind of caught up with them. Jaylen Brown did not make it after he was having a career season. Eric, what's your take on the Boston Celtics?
I mean, just kind of quick. They're in a transition period. They assigned Tatum and Brown to max extensions, and I think they're looking to build around both of them. Nobody's going to take Kemba Walker's contract, especially with his health. And they don't have any draft picks. They're kind of, they don't have the Brooklyn Nets 4 first rounders that they fleeced them. They're going to have any picks they have are going to be towards the later, end of the first round. So
would you trade Jaylen Brown for Dame?
Yeah, easily.
Kev?
For that, I don't know. I guess if you think Dame will put you over the top. But
in the East,
I would do it.
I mean, the East is tough, guys. You're talking about the Sixers, the Nets, those groups there. I mean, that's gonna be the Bucks, I guess. But you
put 2 of the top 10 players in the league on the same team. That's freaking dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, to Eric's point, Kemba he has a net negative contract. 2 years, $73 million. God, how did he get that deal? I wish I had his agent. And then he's got knee injury and oblique issues, and he's getting older. I don't see that being there. I think what makes the most sense for them is probably to move on from Marcus Smart. Maybe he might be their best asset to kind of get something.
That's true.
So if I'm going to do anything, it might be to get rid of Marcus Smart because he's your best movable asset, unless you're going to try to trade Brown those guys and then try to look for that. But I do know that Brad Stevens loves Marcus Smart. So I don't know if his first business as a GM now is to get rid of the guy that he says he likes to build his team around, do those things. But if anybody knows what this team kind of needs from the inside, it's Stevens. So if he's going to shake it up, he's going to make those moves. So that's kind of where my opinion is there.
And you make a good point that Marcus Smart is the greatest tradable asset that they have on that team, but I think you still run with that young core of Smart, Brown, and Tatum, and somehow try to move on from Kemba. But let's address the elephant in the room. They have front court issues. They've had front court issues this entire time that they've been successful the last 5 years, and they got to address that. Brad Stevens saw that every single day, and I think that's what needs to be addressed in the summertime. But man, Smart, Brown, Tatum, they're all, very, very young players. And, 2 of them are all-stars in ascending. And so they still have a bright future, and they still got some time to figure it out. Pippen and Jordan didn't figure it out year number 1. So not saying they're Pippen and Jordan people. Do not come for me. I'm just saying they're young, good superstar players in this league. Sometimes experience serves well. Now let's talk. I saved the best for last. We got to talk about hometown Wizards here in Triple Play Fantasy. They're in limbo once again. Scotty Brooks' decision not imminent. Catherine Evans hired as the first woman in NBA to run the analytics department. Kev, what's your thought about the Wizards and this depressing nature that we have over here in Washington?
I'm just glad you guys are finally on the analytics train. I feel like that's something that you should have been doing for the last 10, 15 years. And And just I'm happy that the Wizards are finally getting there. I don't know. You guys are screwed. I don't know what you're gonna do. That contract for us is pretty immovable. I know we said it all the time. That team is built weird. You're gonna have to get rid of Beal. I hate to break it to you guys. Like it's if you're gonna try to rebuild and do these things, you're gonna keep getting the 8th or 9th seed and just what? Like it's gonna be there. We talked about it pre-show. Coach talking about the Warriors are definitely a good option there with that pick with the Timberwolves.
Wiseman, Wiggins, in that
No.
top 5, top 10 pick from the Warriors.
No,
do you do that, Eric?
No, because if you trade Beal, you don't take on a worse contract. I've been saying the Wizards need to blow it up. Like they don't have a championship contender. This is the highest Bradley Beal's trade value is ever going to be. People forget he had a stress condition in his leg like 4 or 5 years ago where he was supposed to be on a minutes restriction. If Bradley Beal gets hurt, his trade value is done and he has a bad contract. You trade him, you have Westbrook for another couple of years. You start to tank. You get some bad picks. You have some young talent in Gafford. Thomas Bryant's on a fairly reasonable contract. Rui Hachimura, get rid of Scott Brooks. I think Scott Brooks has been a very overrated coach considering the talent he's had and only being able to get to one finals. Like, I understand if you were Tommy Shepard, you want to give it one more run as a GM and not step in for Ernie and blow it up right away, but you have to.
Yeah. I think look, I would take a hard look at that package. I mean, Wiseman, it does show promise. He was the 2nd overall pick in the draft, and I know that he had an injury his first year, but you can't just give up on some like a big guy that has an injury in their first year. We saw Embiid; it took him a while, but he has got some tools. He's got some wingspan. He's got some intangibles that you would like. And then for that pick, is in a draft like this, like you want young players, and Wiggins isn't a scrub. It's not a good contract, but he's a good fit for the Wizards and Westbrook, and maybe Westbrook can, fire him up to the point where he had a good year this year with the Warriors with a guy like Draymond Green getting on his back. He was productive. He wasn't like I said, he wasn't a scrub. And moving on from Bradley Beal, I would hate it as a fan, but at a certain point, you do have to start looking for the future. And if you can get an asset like this T-Wolves pick, you could land, you could hit a star, and that's what you would try to hope for. And for the Warriors, I'd do it in a heartbeat. They put with Beal, Thompson, Steph, and Draymond, dude, that's a top 4 team in the NBA, and I would say yes in a heartbeat. I just don't know what other packages that you can get for Brad Beal that are going to be more enticing as far as with young talent and a pick like that. All right, and who knows? You could probably ask for 2. It's freaking Brad Beal. That is all we have for you today. We are going to be glued for Game 7, and we can't wait to see what happens throughout the week to kind of touch on as far as how these playoffs is going. I know Eric was telling me that this is the first time that Dallas, the Lakers, anybody that's won a championship in how long? Eric, can you throw out that stat again?
Yeah, so if Dallas loses, the 8 remaining teams are going to be the 76ers, the Hawks, the Nets, the Bucks in the East. And the Jazz, you have in the West, you have the Jazz, the Suns, the Nuggets, and the Clippers. None of those teams would have won a championship since the year 2000. So it's going to be interesting that a new fan base in the second round of the playoffs that we're already going to have a new champion.
Good save, my friend. And since the year 2000, that is incredible. So
it's probably even longer because the Bulls, Rockets, Spurs dominated. We're probably going to go back to the 80s.
And we would love it. And as the true NBA basketball fans, we actually like to see this, a little change at the top. I know some people are upset. LeBron James might not be there if the Nets fall on their face with the James Harden happening, which we don't see. It could be, a Utah versus the Bucks in the final, or however you want to shape it up. And that's cool. That's cool for the true basketball fan. And it's good to see another guy get it. Like we saw what that did for Dirk's legacy. We saw what it's done for Chauncey Billups and all those guys in Detroit, what it did for their legacy, just to win one. And we wouldn't be mad at that. I'm a little upset that LeBron James is at home, but enjoy the time off, rest a little bit, get back at it. You got like a 2-3 year window left. What? With that, I don't know if you guys have any parting words. Stay safe at home. Thanks for your listens each and every week. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. We're dropping things every day, every other day. It's crazy. The brand just keeps building. We're talking about food. We're talking about one-on-one fantasy matchups. It just we're ever growing, and we appreciate you guys, the listeners, each and every week.